looks like I am live. Let me flip this. Let me just go close the door real quick. Welcome everybody online. I got a couple people in class with me today. My name is Saxon, the camera class host, and today we'll be doing our intro to camera class because it is the first Thursday of the month. Let me pull this up nice and big for everybody here. So, camera basics or intro to photography. I got a couple different names. I think I titled this one Intro to Cameras. The main idea behind these classes as a whole is to educate people. For the most part, I would say, when we're getting into this kind of stuff, it's that maybe we've had a camera in the past, we remember the quality, cell phones came around, and that really changed the name of the game when it comes to cameras. Made it easy, made it affordable, you needed a cell phone to begin with, now put a really high-powered camera on there, it's the best of both worlds. For a lot of us though, I think that over time we got so used to the cameras on our phone that we started to lose track of the quality that we were missing out on the phones. And as we start to continue our photography journey, we realize the phones are limited in what they can and can't do, and so we gravitate towards getting back to cameras. So this class is really meant for the people who are looking to buy their first camera, to the people who just bought their first camera and now want a tutorial on kind of what the meat and potatoes of it really includes. So we go into the very basics of it, which will start with us talking about the buttons and where photos go, all the way then into lenses and understanding why lenses matter on a camera. Now, when you have a model like yourself, if it's a point and shoot model, you don't have necessarily the change in lenses, but the button control and everything else is very similar to that. For any of my students who are in class today, ask any questions that you have throughout the whole thing, interrupt, and I'll answer them live for you. For anybody watching at home, same idea, you've got a chat feature on your side there. You can comment and chat whatever you'd like. Just keep it appropriate and I'll answer that on camera for you as well too. So, without further ado, let's jump on in. So I like to start by prefacing that I am one resource that you can come to. I'm here every day except for Tuesdays and Wednesdays at Apt Electronics. Any of my colleagues downstairs are fantastic as well too. Most of them are very educated on cameras and kind of the what to do with them. However, though, I like to preface what else you can look at. So I always recommend reading the owner's manual. Some of your cameras don't come with an owner's manual. It might come with a couple pieces of paper on the warranty. Others will come with a full novel on what it is that the camera does and doesn't do. I definitely recommend taking a read at that, getting familiarized with it. It'll tell you where buttons are, it'll tell you what they do, it'll kind of give you a little tutorial on the whole thing. And while it might seem like gibberish, there might be one or two things that we don't cover today that you say, okay, what does that do? Or my favorite is to get the people who buy camera, they get all gung-ho about it, life gets in the way, and then before you know it, you're like, wait a minute, what does that do again? So definitely would recommend. For those that like to ask questions and get answers, Imaging Resource is great too. It's a blog-style website. It's kind of like a Reddit or another form of blog website where you go on, you list maybe what camera you have, what problem is occurring, and hundreds of people on there will answer your question, talk to you a little bit. If you're really into that kind of stuff and you like to nerd out about cameras, the Imaging Resource has a podcast too. It is very spec and detail oriented. So if you are, unless you're a real camera nerd, it might be a little over your head, but if you really are getting into this and you want to learn more about just all sorts of stuff, real fun resource. Canon, Nikon, Sony have fantastic websites that break down not only your model, but just the kind of how to do a photography. My personal favorite is Nikon's website. I think they are the best website when it comes to understanding photography. And my personal favorite, I think the holy grail of all resources, is YouTube. I can't tell you enough. I had to fix plumbing in my house and redo electrical work. I learned it all on YouTube. Contractors, plumbers, everything. They'll tell you everything you need to know. Andy Traynor, shout me out or I'm leaving. Hi there, Andy. Anywho, so you got YouTube. That would probably be one of my favorite resources that you have available to you. So let's talk about SD cards. I think that's the second most important. For the most part, all the cameras that you purchased come with no internal storage. That's not to say that they don't want you to have any, because you need it to actually record and take pictures and video. However, they don't give any internal storage when you first buy the camera, because they want to make sure you buy what you actually need for it. So, for example, you'll see that there are tons of different cards on this little sheet right there, and they have various different things that they're saying. Now, to start with the first one, gigabyte size. That's an important part. Make sure you're buying an SD card that's appropriate to your gigabyte size. Now, if you have a simple, let's say 2016 megapixel camera, you probably don't need anything higher than a 64. That's a good way to get started when you're first shooting. Now, the other term that you're going to hear nowadays too is SD card, but it'll be SDXC and SDHC. HC is an older model. Some products won't take an XC card. Now, the two cameras that my gentleman in front of me have, both are new modern cameras, so XC would be preferable. Again, if you pop the card out, you'll read it right on there. It'll say SDXC or SDHC. HC is the older tech, XC is the newer tech. It just comes down to the speed and the way that the cards are physically formatted and made. The other thing to keep in mind is the megabytes per second. Now, we call that read and write speed. Read and write speed is important to everything that we're doing. The higher your camera is, or let's say the more powerful it is, the faster you want that read and write speed. That's like, the best way I can describe it is when you're in school and your teacher says something, that's your ability to read what they're saying and then write it down quickly. That's the same thing that your camera's doing. You take that picture, it's reading the information that you're taking, and it's writing it onto the SD card. So the faster you are, or maybe the more, let's say, action that you're doing, the faster you want to make sure that card is. If you have a slower camera, an intro, a hobbyist camera, then you're fine with whatever you can get your hands on. Relatively speaking, these SD cards aren't that expensive. So the first thing I say too is to make sure you have two of them. These have tiny little copper contact strips in the very back of the card. If you pick it out and take a look at it, you'll see it right away. Those contact strips can get worn out or damaged over time. And that being said, the more that you're taking the card in and taking it out and putting it into the computer and using it a bunch, that card over time is going to wear itself out, and eventually one day you'll put it in the camera and it will no longer work. So it's important to have two of them. I would say, just in case. It'd be an awful thing if you went on vacation, you're in a beautiful part of the nature, or you go to a national park, for example, and you go to take a picture, and now it's saying, sorry, I can't take any of your photos. Or it lets you take all your photos, and when you get home you realize, oh no, they don't work. So have two of them when you go places. It's better safe than sorry when it comes to these guys. They're tiny, they're disposable, but yeah. Your picture shouldn't live on the memory card. I'm going to show you step by step for what I do to download my images onto my computer. But I always tell customers that the idea behind an SD card is like it's your car. If your, let's say, computer is home and your camera is work, the SD is going back and forth between those two, downloading the images from one to the other. I have a lot of people that will buy, I have one guy in particular that I sell to here in the store who buys maybe, he's purchased 50 or 60 of these SD cards off of me, and he's very anal about making sure that he doesn't delete them off the card. And while I think that's fine, I do get a little bit worried that one day he'll lose all of his stuff because they are a fragile piece of plastic. So again, use it as a tool, but it shouldn't live on the memory card. They should live on your computer and a few other different sources, which we'll talk about in just a second. So my best steps to make sure you don't lose or damage any of your photos from your SD card are as follows. First and foremost, turn your camera off. It's very similar to when you're using your computer or you're using something and you have to unplug it. It's a good idea to turn it off first before undoing something, so that way you make sure if there's any actions this thing is still doing, it finishes them up. The other thing I tell people too is if you really want to test this, take a couple pictures. After you take a few pictures, turn the camera off, hold it next to your ear. You'll physically hear the thing powering down on the inside. By doing that, you're making sure that by waiting 5 seconds, that everything's done, it's turned off, it's saved the photos that it needs to, and now your camera's officially at rest and it's not using that SD card anymore. Once you've done that, remove the physical card. Take it out of the camera and place that into a card reader. I like to say to try to avoid using your camera to transfer the photos to and from your device. However, both of your cameras, modern cameras nowadays, have apps that you can download on your cell phone, and you're able to transfer those photos via the app as well, and that's totally fine. Try it out. It will, give you a quick access to your photos. I tell people if you're on vacation and got mom and dad or friends or kids saying, hey, I'd love to see what you're doing right now. If you want to transfer 10 photos over to your phone, by all means, go for it. It kills the battery on the camera, so be aware of that too. If you're out and about and you can't charge your camera for a little while, it will deplete the battery pretty quickly. However, though, if you can, wait, place it into a card reader, and remove the card physically from the camera.
You're not damaging anything or the card, are you?
No. I mean, you're gonna have to transfer no matter what. I usually recommend to avoid using a cable too in the camera, for the simplest of reasons of if it unplugs while you're downloading the photos, there's a chance you could lose the photos that way. If let's say you've got, I can say from my own personal experience, I'll come home after a big shoot, I'll get a beer, I'll sit down and start going through all my photos. I've had it once or twice where I accidentally knocked that beer over. Not only do I have my laptop there, but now I've got my camera, which now can all be at risk of being damaged. By putting the SD card there with then the computer, at least now you're having it where just one piece is on the table with you at one time. Declutter as well too. But no, the only reason an SD card, what you got?
Use that seat.
Yeah.
Prime on that thing, it works great.
Yeah, absolutely. You can absolutely download the photos from your camera to your phone. It will diminish the quality slightly. So that's one thing I will say. But again, if you've got a couple photos that you just want to get on your phone so you can see them right away, by all means. I also like doing it on the computer because you can see it on a bigger screen. So you really can see the finer details to see, did you get the shot, did you not get the shot, that sort of thing. These are some examples of card readers out there. I personally own the Trifecta one. I think it cost me 20 bucks. It comes with a USB-A and USB-C endpoint, so it fits into any modern computer or laptop. But you can get as fancy with them as you want or as simple with them. As long as you have something that can help you download the images, that's what's preferable. A lot of computers have gotten rid of the SD cards on there, so it's not a bad idea to have that. So now, this is where we get more into how to download everything properly. So, you've plugged in the SD card, you've got it opened up on your computer. You want to copy all the photos to a destination folder. So if you left click on your computer, you'll be able to create a new folder. I typically like to label my folder whatever the event I was shooting in. So what I tell people is that I'm very particular on how my photos are organized in all my hard drives and computers. I start by having a list that says photos. When I click on that folder, I then have about 15 years worth of folders. Each folder is then labeled by the year I took the photo in. When I click on that year, I then have it divided into months. So I have each month that I would have in that year. When I then click on that month, it then takes me to everything I shot during that month. And then from there, I'll label it whatever the event is. So if my kids were in a game for T-ball and it's, let's say, Cubs versus the Giants, I might label Tommy's T-ball game, Cubs versus Giants, let's say June 7th, 2024. And that'll be in the June file of my 2024 file. That's the way that I would go about doing it, so that way I can easily, quickly find it. If in the future I want to see this, or he asks me when he's 18, like, hey, I'd love to see pictures of my game when I was a kid. I've got it all there for him. When I copy them, I don't want to move them. So I don't want to click all my photos and drag them over. I think that's a bad move, because you can have the possibility of losing those photos. So I want to select all the photos, hit copy, then go over to that folder that I've just labeled, whatever the event was, and paste them into there. I'm duplicating them just to make sure that if something gets disconnected, my computer shuts off, I accidentally unplug something before it finishes, I don't risk the chance of losing all of those photos on one unit to the other. If you're using Windows, Explorer is the way that you can then find that SD card once you insert it. And if you're using Mac, Finder is the way that you'll find the photos or that SD card if you're using Mac. Then my next recommendation is to copy those over to a second place. Now, it doesn't have to be anything in particular. You can choose whatever you want. External hard drives are great. Prime Photos, Google Drive, those are both examples of what you call cloud-based solutions. Those can be very simple to use. You can log into them anywhere in the world that you're at as long as you have internet, a username, and password for those services. I do like the external hard drive personally because I'm able to actually just save them on a hard drive. I like physical items. Makes it easy for me to find. So to then continue that, we'll eject the card first before physically removing it. If you left click on the physical card on your computer, it should have a button that says eject. If you're on MacBook, you can just grab it, drag it over to the trash can. That'll then eject it too. Once you've done that, you can then format the card back in the camera. Now, formatting the card in the camera is going to do two things. One, it's going to erase all the old information on the card, but two, it's going to prime that card for the camera that you're using. So if you haven't formatted your SD card before, you just put it in and started shooting with it, totally fine. Once you download all the images, format the card in the camera. All that's doing is giving you the most optimized card for the camera that you're using. That could make or break, let's say, 400, 500 photos that you're able to get because the card's now formatted and ready for that particular camera you're using. So definitely worth formatting the card inside the camera. The other thing too though is if you've already formatted your card, you're using this thing only with the one camera, you can also delete them while they're still in the computer. Just drag and click on every single photo that you already downloaded to your computer, drag them to the trash can, and be done with it. It really is whatever you prefer as it's you who's doing all the work with this. I say both are fine just as they are. I personally format because I don't want to have to sit there and drag and click each photo to my trash can. Once I take all my photos, I've copied them onto my computer, copy them into another source like a Google Drive or a hard drive, then I'm going to then delete everything by formatting it in the camera.
Does it hurt to leave them on your card?
I recommend not doing it. Then it just gets cluttered up, and before you know it, you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of photos from all these events, and it makes it harder then to find certain ones. And you can go about it any way that you like. I just think it's kind of redundant to have the two. If you've already got it saved to your computer, already got it saved to a hard drive, you're saving it to your cell phone, what's the point of clogging up the SD card? But you can do it however you like. So your backup plan, or the way it should work, SD card is on the top there. That's where the photos are being saved to. Your computer is then where you're transferring them over to. We're copying them, we're not moving them. Once it's on your computer, it's a good size screen, so you really can go through and delete the bad ones, keep the good ones. And then once you've finalized what you like, I recommend putting it onto another spot, copying it over to either a hard drive or to a cloud-based solution. Try a cloud-based solution if you've never have. There's a lot of good ones out there. Google Drive is probably the most famous. If you're working and possibly using Microsoft Outlook for your emails, they have OneDrive available too, which is great. And then my personal favorite is the Adobe Creative Cloud. If you even have the insiest bit of willingness to want to edit your photos, Creative Cloud gives you the ability to have access to Lightroom and Photoshop, but then gives you about 50 gigabytes worth of space to download your images too. So that's a really good resource. Now there's three main types of cameras that we're going to be looking at. All of them are similar. They act a little differently. DSLR is the one everyone's most familiar with. DSLRs replaced SLRs, single lens reflexes. Those were your film cameras. There was a mirror on the inside, light would come in, mirror would pop up, burn into the film, you'd then extend to move the film over, and then be ready to take a picture. They got rid of the film, they made it digital, and so DSLRs were born. Those came out late 90s, early 2000s is when they really fully became very popular. Film started to then die out. Mirrorless eventually took over. Mirrorless was created by Leica. Leica then sold it to Minolta. Minolta was then bought out by Sony. And Sony really brought mirrorless into the future. It's now one of the most popular, sought-after types of cameras. There's always arguments whether or not the clarity of a mirrorless is similar to DSLR and film, and I don't think that debate really holds any merit, just because mirrorless is an extremely different technology and just kind of does things that no other camera's been able to do. In that same category with mirrorless, though, comes the point-and-shoot and bridge cameras, like what you have over there. Sony is a point-and-shoot bridge camera. Now they say it's a bridge because it's the in-between from film to mirrorless or DSLR. However, point and shoots have become so much more powerful nowadays. Some people really prefer point and shoots over other cameras. And really the idea behind it is that it's a camera with no interchangeable lenses. It's an all-in-one camera, and you don't really have to fiddle around with a lot of different things on there. Mirrorless and point and shoot cameras are basically the same thing, just minus the ability for you to remove the lens from the camera. It's the biggest thing that I can say is the difference. A lot of the times point and shoots are compact, they're small, they're really great for those who don't want to travel with a big heavy duty setup. So let's now go through a tour of your camera and just break down everything that is kind of on the camera as a whole. Before I do that, to break down a little bit more of mirrorless and DSLR, because this is the big debate that happens nowadays. Mirrorless cameras are smaller, they're lighter weight, they're faster, they're better for low light performance. Reason being in a lot of those ways is because the mirror and the pentaprism are gone from the DSLR body. Light would come in, bounce off that mirror, cut through a pentaprism, and that's how you'd be able to see it through the optical viewfinder. Once you take that picture and hit the shutter button, the mirror clicks up, burns into the sensor, and then on the screen you see the image that you just took. Nowadays, shutters there, electronic viewfinders here, all this hardware is connected to the image sensor, which tells you exactly what you're about to take a picture of. Shutter then clicks, you get your picture, and you see it in the same amount of time that a DSLR would do it. But because those little pieces are now gone, you've got a lighter weight camera, smaller camera, and on top of that too, it weighs less because the mirror and the pentaprism aren't in there. So if anybody out there right now who's watching is considering making the jump, and you haven't used your camera in some times, I would probably tell you to make the jump to mirrorless instead of looking at a DSLR body. Most camera companies are getting rid of those in the next couple of years. So the camera that we're looking at is a Nikon, I believe it's a D8 or a D7000, D6000. It's an old camera. However though, all of the buttons and switches that it has, all of your cameras are going to have. Now, brands like Sony and Canon sometimes will hide the buttons within menus. So you might not see these buttons on top of your camera, but your camera has all of these features in it in one way or another. So to start, you should have, we'll start with the power switch. Power switch is on usually the top of the camera, signified by on and off symbol. One click turns it on, one click will turn it off. If you hold it up to your ear, you'll hear it power down too. Under or somewhere around there should be a video start and stop button. Most of the time it's a red dot or a red circle somewhere on the top of your camera. One press on that will start the video recording. Press it again, it'll stop the video recording. Shutter release is usually somewhere around the power switch button. Can't be for certain for why they do this, but I think it's just for quick access for you to be able to turn it on and off and then really quickly take it and hit that trigger. Half click on the shutter release will do what's called autofocus on your camera. You'll either typically see blue, green, or red squares pop up on the physical camera itself, meaning that it's focused or locked on targets that it's autofocusing on. Full press of the shutter release will then actually take your picture. Around there should be what we call exposure compensation. Now if you're not shooting in automatic, which we'll talk about in a little bit because I do recommend you stick with automatic to start, exposure compensation is a black and white button that when you press on it and use what's called the command dial, you'll be able to then expose your image more or non-expose your image more. And what I mean by that is you make it darker or lighter. This is definitely for the person who's using a more controlled mode on their camera that's not automatic. Let's say you're using manual control and you've set your camera to be the exact parameters that you want it to be, yet your image still looks a little dark or a little too light. Playing with the exposure compensation will take the entire exposure of that picture you have and darken it or lighten it. So that's what that one does. When I talk about mode, I talk about the mode dial. Now, the best way I can describe the mode dial is it's like your gear shift in your car. It's what makes you switch from park to reverse to neutral to drive to any other sorts of things that you might have on there. in the same boat as the mode dial will take you from automatic to manual to aperture priority, shutter priority, program auto, effects, scenes, whatever your camera has, turning that dial will do that. Now, one thing that you'll see on DSLRs that you will not see on your mirrorless cameras is the LV button, the live view. One click of that would then switch your camera from using the viewfinder to the physical screen. Now on Sony, on Canon, on most of the new cameras, you're going to see display nowadays. If you press the display button, that's going to change how your screen looks on your physical camera. So that way now you're able to see it in different ways. And that could just be that maybe you don't want to use the screen. You just want to use the viewfinder. Pressing that button will then switch it so that now you just have the metadata or the information for what your camera is shooting on, but you only can see through the viewfinder. Or it'll take all the little extra stuff away so all you see is the picture you're about to take a picture of. Start with automatic. I think a lot of the times people get very deterred with this and they don't want to pick it up anymore after they spend so much money because they try to use one of the fancier switches on the camera without really realizing that they need to first understand what the camera's doing. So stick with automatic. That's your best friend when you get started with everything. Once you play with automatic after a while, it'll really start to make sense for what changes you yourself need to start making. All mode dials are a little bit different. So these dials don't all look the same across the board. It's important that, again, take a look at your owner's manual, take a look at the dial that you have if you have one. You probably, and your camera, have a switch on there that then allows you to switch between the different modes. So you can still access all these, but because yours is a slim, more compact model, yours are hidden within the physical camera. But in that being said, there's tons of different modes on these guys, and it's important to remember that they all do something a little bit different. You'll see certain ones that don't exist anymore. You'll see ones that everybody has. Take the time to kind of realize and read through what they all do. For the most part, though, all cameras are going to have these couple different modes. So A+, it could be an IA, it also could just say auto on there. Typically it's symbolized with green color. That's auto control over settings and functions of the camera. This makes it real easy. Switch to auto, the camera does all the work for you when you take that picture. It'll balance the light, make sure that things aren't too dark, checks to see how fast objects are moving within your frame. It really is kind of a jack of all trades. As you start to get better with photography, you're going to notice right off the bat what works and what doesn't work on auto, and that's where then you'll learn the other controls that are available to you. One of the most popular being full manual, which is symbolized by an M. That's full control over the camera's array of functions. Anything that you can change on a camera, you can change through manual. A or AV is aperture priority control. That's going to give you the ability to control the camera's aperture. We talk a little bit more about that next week in the intermediate class about what that really means, but aperture is your control of foreground to background separation, as well as how much light is coming into the camera. Aperture is symbolized by what they call the iris of the camera, which is that kind of metal shutters that make it real big or real small. So that's what you're controlling only in A or AV setting. S or TV is your shutter speed. This is how fast the camera is opening and closing its shutters. So by switching to the S or the TV setting, what you're doing is you're controlling the speed. If you know that you're going to be photographing things that are moving really fast, and you don't want to control the full manual control of the camera, S or TV gives you the ability to set that shutter speed only, so that way now you're making sure if you're at the racetrack and cars are going real fast, you can slow or speed up your camera shooting to maybe get that car in freeze frame. That's what that's doing for you. Program or P or program is aperture and shutter speeds are automatic. However, everything else is changeable. Once you've mastered the auto control and you feel very comfortable with what the camera is doing for you, program auto is the same thing. But now let's say focus parameters, right? If I'm looking at focus parameters, I have a window over here in class, but I'll do this little square so people online can see. If you look through the window here and you look at my square that I got up here, you can see that I can see everything through the square. Well, with focus parameters, I'm able to now kind of make my area smaller and smaller. So depending on what I'm seeing, I could just focus on the center of my frame, or on the right side of my frame, or the left side. That's something I could change in Program Auto. If the white balance of my photo looks off, let's say, in here I've got lighting that's canned and recessed in the ceiling, and it's a warm glow. Maybe I've got lighting that's more Christmas lights, so it's iridescent, it's cold. I can change the white balance, that way it gives me a better end product. Those are things that are available to you in Program Auto. Gives you a little bit more control over the camera, while the camera's still doing the meat and potatoes of, okay, the object's moving this fast, you've got this much separation between you and the object, here's where I'm setting my camera to. So fun little changes that you can make. B is a fully customizable setting. You can change the camera to be whatever you want, but as long as you're holding the shutter release camera, the shutter release button, the camera's going to stay open. We call that bulb. If you ever watch an old time movie or know about it, there used to be a period of time where photographers would hold a little light stick up in the air with their camera, and it would be this light bulb that was blue. It would flash, it would make this really obnoxious noise, and they called it the bulb. Nowadays, B stands for a fully open shutter, which for the most part you'll either see is on your camera or it won't be there. But basically, if you're doing long exposure photography, where you're taking pictures of the stars, or you're taking pictures of, let's say, Chicago downtown and there's traffic moving, that's what causes really cool motion blur in your photos, and it can really make some interesting photos for long exposure. So B is your long exposure ability.
There's a couple on this one
Mm-hmm.
that you have SCN.
SCN is scene. So I believe this one. Scenes are automatic modes. They're the same thing as auto, except scene now you can go in there and say, okay, I'm taking a picture of a portrait. That portrait then should be a symbol of like a little face. Maybe you're taking a picture of landscape. Well, they're going to symbolize that with mountains. Maybe you're taking close-up or macro photography, so they do the little flower. Sports or action, they've got the running guy. The no flash, they've got the same thing, a no flash symbol. And then the little white with the person there and the star in the background is nighttime photography. It's automatic, but you're specifying exactly what you're doing. So by putting it to scenes, there should be then another mode for you to use where then you can customize and choose exactly what you're going to be shooting on. I typically just recommend stick with automatic. It's an old feature on those cameras. It, for the most part, was redundant. That's why most cameras got rid of it, so you won't see it on your mirrorless camera anymore. Because the automatic technology really does work well, and those scene modes only works, I'd say, 80 to 50% of the time.
Okay. And then there's another one. HFR.
HFR it should be for your high definition. I'd have to look it up. It's another one that it's only on Sony cameras. It's only on a few models that they made for a period of time. So I'd have to research that to figure out exactly what that was for.
Then MR.
MR is going to be like it's a manual control, but whatever you set it to, it stays like that the whole time. So
There's a couple other just figures on here.
yeah, we could look at it at the very end, and I can kind of go through. But for the most part, I would say
Panoramic or something, I think.
panoramic is another one on there. Yeah, you won't see that on some of them, but yeah, panoramic, one move like this, it's usually a rectangle that then's pulled apart. That's another one.
Okay.
But every mode dial is different. They all have different stuff on there. The meat and potatoes of what you should focus on are these guys here. These are the ones that no matter what camera you have, you will see at least 5, if not all 6 of those on every single mode dial that's around. Now going to the next side of your camera, there is a button that might say flash on there. It'll be a symbol of the lightning bolt going downwards. Press that, the flash engages on your camera. Some will have a switch that does it. Some won't have anything. They'll just have a little pull tab on the physical flash. Some cameras have no flash. A lot of these new mirrorless and point and shoot models do so well in low light situations that unless you're shooting in real dark situations, you probably don't need a flash. FN or function button is a customizable switch. Now, on a lot of Sony cameras, on a lot of Nikon cameras, you press the FN button, it's going to open up a shortcut menu of things that you can change. So if you see an FN button on your camera, that's like your shortcut button. There's also could be a button that says I or another button that says Q. You might see all those available as well too. Now they might not be on the side of your camera, they might be next to the screen of your camera. Again, the one thing I will say with any of these is that the buttons are on all different places on your camera. However, all of these buttons exist in one way, shape, or form. I would say minus the flash button. You probably won't see that one on your camera unless you have a built-in flash. Now, depending on the type of lens that you have with your camera, you might have a zoom ring. The zoom ring is your ability to go from wide angle to a tight angle on your physical camera. So by zooming in on the subject or zooming out of the subject, you go from wide angle to more of a tight or portrait area. The focus ring is kind of what it is. If you're not using automatic focus, this is how you would control manual focus. By turning this ring, you're bringing the object into more focus or into less focus. For older lenses, they will have what's called a lens retract button. You won't see that on most modern cameras nowadays because the cameras are pretty solid. The lenses are solid. However, if you have an older model camera, you're bringing that lens over with you to the new mirrorless technology, you might still see a lens retract button. If you try to move the lens and zoom in, it won't let you until you hold that button down and then zoom in. Same idea, when you're done using the lens, you would turn it all the way, it would click and lock into position and wouldn't allow you to move it until you press the lens retract. Lens release button. By holding this down and turning your lens counterclockwise, you're going to be able to remove the lens from the body of the camera, place the lens back on, turn it clockwise, now it locks back into place. Your drive mode button, which you will see on all of your cameras, it'll just be in a different place most likely, is two different features. Your drive mode is your ability for your camera to shoot in burst or timer or single shot. Usually it's symbolized by a stack of squares on top of each other or a little timer symbol. When the camera's turned on and you press that button, it's going to let you shoot high burst photography. That's like when you're watching sports and you can hear the cameras. That's high burst photography. If you don't have a remote or a phone that you can tether your camera to as well, you can do a timer on there where you then set your camera up, you press the timer, it says 10-20 seconds, you run around to the other side, and then in 10-20 seconds it takes the physical photo. Now, some people will use that just sparingly and they'll use it for just random photography, for other fun stuff. A lot of people will download the app on their phone and then just control it from their phone, because then you can use the timer on your cell phone. Flipping to the front screen, now we have majority of the buttons that you're really going to be familiar with, I would say. Menu button. If there are deep changes that you need to make on your camera, let's say time and date you need to change, Wi-Fi connectivity to connect from your phone to one device, that's where you'd see that in. If you want to customize your menu experience and change things around, that would be done in the menu system as well too. Some advanced settings like bracketing or let's say light metering mode, those would be available to you in the menu system. If you wanted to have a histogram playing while you're shooting and taking photos, that's stuff you'd find in the menu. The menu really isn't for you to change your simple camera settings, let's say like aperture or shutter. It's really made for you to change system programs and changes in your camera. For the most part, you won't need to go in there that often, but some people, as you start shooting and you want to learn more, you might Google online something specific about your camera model and where to find it, and the menu is probably going to be the only place that you will find it. For anybody who wears glasses, diopter adjustment is a big one. If you have a viewfinder on your camera, the diopter adjustment exists on usually the right, left, or bottom part of your viewfinder. Twisting it one way or the other takes the two pieces of glass that are in the inside and moves them back and forth to make sure that when you're shooting, you see through the viewfinder properly. A lot of people, they'll buy their camera, they'll put their eye up to their viewfinder, they'll say it looks blurry, it doesn't look right. That's because you just have to adjust the diopter, just like you adjust a pair of binoculars until you can see out of it properly. Info button is a good one that I really like, and you see a lot of old Nikons and Canons have it. Sony, for the most part, doesn't. But the info button, if you're curious on how something works, or let's say a picture that you took, you want to get the information on, what shutter did it use, what white balance did it use, what focus parameter, what aperture did it use. Pressing the info button will then give you that information. which is a great tool for beginners. The way you'd probably get to that is if, let's say, you've taken a bunch of photos, we're going to skip around a little bit, you'd hit the image playback button, which is usually a triangle and a square. That'll then show you all the pictures on your camera. You can use the multi-selector to scroll through until you find the picture that you love. You say, this is the best picture I took all day. You'd then probably hit info. On some of these cameras, you'd hit display instead too. And from there, it should give you the information on what you just did for that photo. It'll tell you shutter speed. It'll tell you aperture priority. It'll tell you exposure compensation. It'll tell you what your white balance was, what your focus parameters were, what your light metering was. Some of that stuff might make sense, some of it might not, but as you start taking more photos and becoming more accustomed to the technology, then that really is like a nice jumping off point for you to start learning more manual controls. So the info button, the display button on some of your models is a really nice button. Getting back into the list, focus or exposure lock. So when you're taking pictures, there's two ways to focus in on a photo. You can press the top button there and do a half click inwards, that'll focus. Or you can press the AEL/AFL button, which will then lock your focus in place and then start to focus in for you. The other nice feature about that too is that if you're playing with exposure and let's say that you've got a really nice kind of coloration going on the camera that you're using, pressing the exposure lock on there will lock in that exposure. As you move your camera from side to side or around with you, it's going to stay locked in on that exposure level that the camera chose. So again, if you're in a bright sunny place, you hit exposure lock and you said this is perfect, you move around for a little while, it's not going to continuously readjust your exposure for you. It's going to lock into whatever you decided for it to be. The I button. I think I mentioned it earlier. FN, I, Q, they're all very similar buttons because they can really just access that quick shortcut menu for you. Depending on what your white balance is, your light metering, your focus parameters, there's a few other things, target detection on there for some certain cameras. That's what that I button's going to give you. Now, if you're shooting in automatic, it might do nothing for you when you click on it, but when you get into more of the advanced settings, that's what that button's going to exist for. The OK button is your enter button. Pressing on that will, enter, will say OK, continue. That also could be a way that when you're using the multi-selector tool, you click OK on a photo. Again, there could be tons of different reasons for having that button. Magnifier, demagnifier usually are symbolized on the bottom or somewhere on the camera, but you'll see a microscope, or not microscope,
Magnifier.
magnifier. Thank you. Jesus, I couldn't think of that. Magnifier, it'll have a plus or a minus symbol on the inside there. Hitting the one that has the plus will magnify in, hitting the one that has the minus will magnify out. I like to use that tool all the time because it helps me see the detail of each of my photos. If let's say I took 6 of the photos of the same thing, I might go through the photos, find the one I think is the best, magnify in until I see how blurry it gets to a certain point or how pixelated it gets. That just tells me how much information this thing was really able to bring in.
Excuse me, I have the magnifier, it has AF-on.
Yep, that's the auto. That's the
Autofocus?
That's the autofocus. That's that exposure lock we were just talking about.
Exposure line.
Mhm.
And then next to it, it just has a magnifying.
Yep. So it's a multi-button, so it can do both of those features.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Depending on what you're doing, if you're taking a photo, it's not going to magnify. It's going to do auto exposure or autofocus lock. And then if you are doing a image playback and you're scrolling through, pressing that button will then magnify in for you. Somewhere probably on the bottom, you'll see the magnify minus. Usually it's hidden somewhere on there, but you get both. Other than that, you got the delete button. And that's the last button that you'll probably see on there. Garbage can with its lid kind of half coming off. Again, you don't like a photo on there, you scroll through using the multi-selector, you hit delete, it'll say, are you sure you want to delete? You'll press the OK button, takes it off the camera. Again, not all of these cameras are going to have each of these buttons clearly labeled on there. Some of them are going to be in the menu system or inside the camera's guts, for the lack of a better term, and then you just have to navigate the camera a little bit. But as you start navigating the camera and looking for certain things, you are going to come across every single part of this. Again, for like a model like you have, you might not come across like the diameter because you don't have a viewfinder on there. However, though, you'll come across the exposure lock, you'll come across the playback, the eye, you'll come across a bunch of those.
Sorry, you got another?
Sure.
This has got on here a C1, C2, and C3.
On your dial? Yeah, those are.
Well, on the dial, yes, but also on the,
Those are customizable buttons.
Yeah.
You can set those to be whatever you'd like.
so, but I mean,
I was wondering about that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, C1, C2.
C1, C2, and then sometimes C3 are customizable. So depending on if there's a shortcut that you'd like, let's say that as you go and you're like, okay, I like changing the white balance in my photo. You can set C1, C2, or C3 to be the white balance feature. If let's say that you're going and you want to set focus parameters or target detection, where it can detect dogs, humans, cats, airplanes, and trains, which Sony's known for, then you can set that on there as well too. That's what those buttons are for.
well, obviously, if you set it in the mode dial, it's there. But what if you're in auto and you press one of the buttons?
They won't do anything for you.
So, how do you access it?
Well, it's when you're not in automatic. So again, when you're in automatic, you're basically letting all your liberties go for what you can do.
So if you're in aperture and you press C1, does it,
It'll let you change something.
okay,
That one you can decide what it is. Just going into the menu settings, you can then pick to see what you want C1, C2, or C3 to be. And you can leave them as nothing. They should already be pre-programmed with something. So if you turn it on, go to aperture priority, go to any of the modes on your camera, press that button real quick, you'll see what it's automatically set to. If as you're shooting, you're like, I think this would be more helpful for me, you go to the menu button, you can then find C1, C2, C3, and then change it to whatever you want it to be. And it'll give you a list of what they allow you to change it to.
I don't want, this is just specific to this, but one of your salesmen downstairs, I came in and he programmed the 1 and 2 and 3 for me.
Yeah.
For sports, for landscaping, for portraits,
Okay.
basically. But I forget which is which. Can you tell me which?
We can take a look. They
Not-
should.
you don't have to do it.
I don't think that that's how he would have set it though. Personally, it wouldn't make. I mean, if he did, then he probably set these 3 for you.
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
Those 3. I just don't know what they are.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not seeing that on there. Nothing's changing when I'm doing it. So yeah, I don't think he did anything. Yeah, nothing's changing on any of these.
What about the other button?
Well, so if I press on C2, it's going to open up your focus parameters and how you can go from wide to tight to all the whole screen, that thing.
That's going way over my head right now.
Yeah. C1 is then changing your white balance on there.
Okay.
And then, let's see, you go to C3 button.
I don't know what it is, but I'll see. If I see it down there, I'll ask him, because I never
Yeah.
programmed them, but I don't know.
Yeah,
how I did.
triple check. I'm not 100% sure what he would have switched them to.
Yeah.
But this, currently right now, your 1, 2, 3 are all the same.
Okay.
Again, the biggest thing is to play with the camera, is to play with all the things on there, to go through. It's gonna be confusing, but once you start actually executing and doing stuff on there, then it starts to really kind of reveal itself a little bit. And like you said, I mean, some of that stuff's over your head for now. So again, as always,
So my problem is I'll input something, let's say the C1.
yeah,
Then I say, how did I get here? What did I do to
Yeah.
put this? So.
it's just playing with it. It's just getting more comfy with it. The one thing I will say is like, again, automatic's great, and I love shooting on auto, but it gets confusing after a little bit because then you're like, what am I doing? Like that's, I think, the biggest thing. You're just letting the camera decide for you. The more you play with it and the more you experiment, I think the more it becomes more apparent on like what you're changing and doing. But you just gotta keep shooting. That's what I tell people all the time. This was a picture a customer emailed me one time, and they were adamant that their camera didn't work, and I had to explain to them that, sometimes it's not the baseball bat, it's the baseball player. It's the way that you're using the tool. You just have to get used to it. I then found out she was shooting in full manual because that's what her friend told her to shoot in, so she had no idea what she was actually doing. Take a breather with it, learn how the camera functions, don't be afraid to try new things, but when you try new things and they're not clicking or working for you, try something else. In this case, just saying your camera doesn't work for whatever reason, without having some, basic knowledge of what you're doing, it's not surprising.
Yeah.
So,
That's it.
I love showing this picture. I think it's really funny to me. It's funny to me.
Yeah, these cameras are, man,
There's a lot that they do.
technology in it is awesome.
And
Too much.
that's why I also love telling, like, too, your camera's not a smartphone. The reason that the phone cameras exist the way they do is that they made it so easy.
Yeah.
Point, you shoot, you click. The phone's intuitive, it's smart, it does all these things right off the bat. That's not to say that your real camera can't do that. It's just that remember that sometimes you've got to play with it a little bit to find out where those spots are.
Yeah.
Take the time to, again, learn, understand it, and as you figure stuff out, question yourself, how did I do that?
Yeah.
It's like the thing of like, okay, if someone says it, reads it, and writes it, it's going to be ingrained in your head faster than if you just sit there and read a bunch of stuff, right? So it's the same boat with the phone, or with the camera. Your camera's not a smartphone. It's not going to have the same functionalities that it does. However, all the stuff that your phone can do for pictures, your camera can absolutely do. You just got to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
This one seems simple, but I do like to talk about it. Photography, art in general, anything that you're doing with your hands can lead to both carpal tunnel and arthritis pretty quickly. Just think about the way that you're contorting and putting your hands in. It also can be uncomfortable to take photos, and people then get deterred for bringing out their big camera sets because it hurts their neck or it hurts their back. So best practices, pretend like it is you're holding a tray. When you're holding the tray, you're not holding it out like this where people can bump into you and hit your elbows and you can drop everything. You want to keep your arms down below. I like to think of it as the supports to the porch deck. If this is the deck that you have, you've got supports coming down to hold the deck in place. So when you're shooting, you should have one hand on the top of the camera, one hand on bottom of the camera. Usually you'll have the hand on the side grip of the camera where the trigger is located, and then usually you'll have your hand on the lens. Now in the case of a small camera, you might have that on the side there. You might also just shoot with one, but keeping that arm low, tucked in, and trying to keep it against your ribs is also a good option too. That creates more support and balance and stabilization. The other thing that neither of them have on is a camera strap. But if you do have a camera strap, pull taut on the camera strap so it's nice and tight by the neck. That'll also help give you more stabilization so you're not so shaky. Cameras nowadays have internal stabilization. They have anti-shake mode on there. So for the most part, if you're a little shaky, the camera shouldn't pick up on that. You've got the gimbal on there, not the gimbal, but the tripod stand that has the Bluetooth remote to it. It's an awesome thing to have on there. Even with the camera's stability and everything else as you're holding it, it shouldn't shake and do anything for you. But if you notice that, that's where there's other accessories that you can pick up and you can really get into it. Other thing being said is try to keep your back as straight as possible. It's the same idea when you're lifting stuff. Lift with your legs, not your back. It's for the longevity of it. It's so that way the next morning after you just took pics of the grandkids or of your kids, you're not sitting there like, oh God, that was a bad day. So just try to protect yourself as best as you can after you've taken pictures or while you're taking pictures, just to ensure you don't have problems later on. Focus, then shoot, and shoot through the picture. I get a lot of people that will try to be very quick as they're taking pictures. They'll sit, they'll snap, they'll snap, they'll snap, they'll move. That's great, but give yourself the time to focus on the picture. If you've got something that's moving, that's great. These cameras are fast. They have good fast tracking modes on there, so you shouldn't have to just sit there and snap real fast. If that's the case, then go into the drive mode, set it to high burst, do it where it's but like save it where then you are focusing in on the object that you're trying to take a picture of. Focus, and then click and shoot through the whole photo. The other thing too is I get people who will just focus on one little detail. Behind me I've got all these mugs. And you might sit there and focus on just this one. But let's say for whatever reason, maybe something's going on in the roof and all this stuff is jumbling and shaking around. You take all these beautiful pictures of this mug, but you don't realize now there's motion blur over on that side. Pay attention to the whole frame. I know we get locked in on one part of the picture that we're taking, but if we can sit, focus, then shoot, and make sure we're shooting the whole frame, I'd say 8 out of 10 times you're going to get a much better picture than if you just sit, click, and move, and you're not actually paying attention to how your camera's focusing on things.
That's a good point too, because like when you're out in public, you know, people don't want their pictures taken. And they're
100%.
trying to,
You try to hide it, and I
yeah.
think that again, it's funny because there's laws like in New York, for example. My buddy who lives out there was telling me with photography, where unless you're taking a picture and you're disclosing information of who that person is, technically there is no law that in New York that says you can't take a picture, and if people are in there, as long as you're just using it for art or for your personal use, you're not making a movie about someone's life and not telling them, then you're completely fine. And I think that's one thing, people get very hokey, they don't want to be on camera and this and that, but it's like, for the most part, that picture is either just for you or to put on your social media or to show your photography skills, and especially in street photography when you're just walking around photographing life or whatever it is, it's...
And once in a while you run into them Karens.
Yeah, exactly. They get hoity-toity about it. I wouldn't, take the time, focus, shoot. Afterwards, you can just, I always, I'll fake an accent and go, no English. And then usually people just kind of walk away. Usually also with the beard, nobody messes with me either. I'll just be walking. I was in Australia for my vacation, and I brought my camera with me, and I was taking gorgeous photos. And someone's like, what are you taking pictures of? I'm like, just life thing.
Yeah.
No, it's fun. They were like, okay. And they just gave me a thumbs up, walked away. I was like, perfect. Yeah. Just have fun with it. That's the whole point. You bought a camera either to, I make the joke, you bought the camera to either take pictures of your friends and family, you bought the camera to take pictures of your pets or the hobbies and things that you love, or you bought the camera because you're bored, you got nothing else to do, and photography seems like a cool hobby. There's so many different reasons why you might get into it, but at the end of the day, the goal is to get cool pictures, something you're proud of, and something that you can call art. So, have fun with it.
When I brought this camera, I had they told me iCloud.
Yeah.
Apple was saying, well, we're gonna charge you, you got too many. So I rushed out, I was going to Jerusalem, Israel. And I said, well, I'll just buy me a camera instead of playing, with iCloud. So I had no intentions of buying a camera, so I came here and brought it. I didn't know it was gonna be $500. I was gonna be paying. But the guy was telling me, he says, well, everybody's, taking pictures on the camera now.
Yeah.
But
I tell people that all the time. It's weird, but I had a group that just came in today. They're trying to buy a gift for their granddaughter for Christmas, and they're just being a little spontaneous and early on it. And they're looking, and they asked me, they're like, "What's the average camera go for?" I'm like, "Well, at the cheap end, it's probably about $500 to $700." And they kind of like looked at me big-eyed. They're like, "Are you kidding me?" And I was like, "Well, it's not. It's sticker shock." But the way you think about it is, these phones became so advanced that if you try to compete with an iPhone, you're at the $700, $500 range, where it's like, okay, now you're at the same quality as a phone, but now you have a dedicated camera that can shoot amazingly. Now you move up from there, and it only goes up on quality, on control, on everything else. So that is something to keep in mind with it. And I had to break it down for, and they were like, "Do you have any?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I have these. They're not going to take pictures at, I think it was a $100, $150 camera. I'm like, it's not going to take a picture as good as an iPhone. But if your 4th grade daughter wants something that's just a camera and that she can play with and putz around with, absolutely." And they were happy about that. But again, it's quality versus how much you're spending. But then once you learn how it works and you get to really play with it, you're like, damn, those are good pictures.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot.
Yeah.
Since I got it.
Yeah. One thing I'll say too is if you're moving or the camera's moving, you will get blurry photos. There are tons of artists that made thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars based on blurry pictures. You are not that artist. You're just trying to get a good picture. You're trying to understand the fundamentals of photography. Take your time, slow down, try not to move. If you're on a moving object like a boat or something and you're getting pictures, totally fine. Just figure out the settings to change so that way you can get the proper images. When I was in Australia, I took a lot of ferries around the harbor. And when you're doing that, it was really easy for me to just change the speed of my camera to make sure that I got pictures of the Sydney Opera House or of the big bridge and everything else. So there's ways to do it if you're moving, but just keep that in mind, that if you're moving, the camera's moving, and you don't change settings, you might get blurry pictures. Date your body, mirror your glass. Now this gets into lenses as a whole, so I'll be excluding at least one of you on this, but in photography, the glass is the most important part. Even with your camera, my biggest recommendation is keep that lens clean, spotless. Don't use a t-shirt or a towel to clean it. Use a little microfiber cloth, get them with glasses, and get them for a couple bucks online. But just have something that's nice and clean that you can constantly clean the glass with, because that's where the money is on a photo. Camera body eventually dies out a little bit after time, but that lens, the glass, is the most important part. So in the camera world, we say date the body. You've probably got 10 good years with that camera body before it then kind of poops out on you. But if you invest in good glass, high quality glass, you'll be able to keep that going forever. So in that world, we need to understand lenses. Now, focal length and zoom are the same idea. Now, scientists years ago, engineers years ago, when cameras were coming in and becoming a thing in the late 1800s, early 1900s, were able to figure out a way to do math on if I position this piece of glass, which is asymmetrical, and this piece of glass, which is spherical, and then this piece that's flat, I can then create depth of field, I can create focal length. When they say 70 millimeters, 200, 105, 400, it's not actually if you pull out a ruler and measure the millimeter size next to the lens. It is a mathematical number that these scientists were able to figure out, determine, and then put that into lens technology. So I don't truly know where the science and the math lines up for it, but I can at least tell you how to understand it. The smaller the number, the more wide angle you're going to get. The larger the number, the tighter the focus is going to become. So depending on what you're taking pictures of, 24, 14, 16 millimeters, those are considered your wide angle. When you're taking pictures of birds or nature or things that you can't get that close to, you have distance on you, that's where then you get your big telephoto sucker lenses. Those are huge lenses typically, but the detail is in the pudding there where you get real close up on the object. It's important to remember that as you zoom in, you're not just bringing the object closer to you, but you're bringing everything closer with you. So at 70 millimeters, we're in the swampy, marshy area. We can see kind of this standout part of the land, the dirt. We can see the trees and the forests in the background. We can see mountain ranges, a lot of sky, probably about 40% of sky with the 60% of water and land. And then we can see a mountain range in the background. As we zoom in a little closer, I'd say sky and water are getting closer to 50-50. Our land is closer. We can see buildings in the background of a city or a town, and the birds are starting to get closer. At 200, it's much closer. The sky is basically gone now at this point. Water is slowly but surely getting smaller, and everything behind it is coming closer. That part of the town that we had up here at 105 is being cut off. Now we're just getting a corner of a building over here and a few buildings there. And then at 400, we don't see any sky. The mountains are right up on us. The green is there as well too. You can really see the coloration of where the water and this kind of marshy area meet. And we can really see it close with the birds. So when you're using focal length and zoom, which are the same thing, you're bringing not only the item that you're taking a photo of closer, but you're bringing everything closer. With that being said, you can also get what's called distortion or compression. Distortion and compression, very interchangeable words. Think about it, to distort something, you're changing its kind of features. To compress something, you're really bringing it in and making it smaller or tighter. At a wide angle point in a lens, it'll compress your image a little bit. Now for things like landscape or architecture photography, the wide angle is fantastic. It makes things look really big and oversized and large, and it's great, especially when you're in indoor settings. When I was traveling, that was one of my favorite things, is to get wide angle, especially in rooms with high ceilings, because it almost makes the ceiling look like it's 60 feet taller than it really is, and it just makes it feel otherworldly. When you start taking pictures of people, though, and you do that tight angle, and you can see as we get to the smaller number how the nose comes close, the eyes narrow in, and the face drops backwards. You start to lose what humans really look like. And at too large of a number, you almost make them look too chubby or big. So you can see at about 100, 200, his face becomes more round and square than when it's at a true portrait, which is about a 50 millimeter. So keep in mind that not only are you bringing things closer inwards, but you can compress and distort an image depending on the lens that you're using. All lenses have different purposes, and people can find whatever purpose they need a lens to be. But it's important to remember in the grand scheme of focal length and everything else that it can alter or distort the image in slight different ways. You can see too how as we change the zoom and the focal length, the kit doesn't move. The photographer might move back and forth to make sure that they get the proper zoom on the lens, but that tree in the background continues to come more forward, and go real far backwards. These are the most common lenses that you're going to see out there. I'm going to then go through these, and then I'll tell you what my Trinity is, and I'll put quotations around the fact that you need these lenses, because you really don't need any of the lenses. Start with my favorite, the kit lens. If you're buying a brand new camera and you're just getting into things, whether it's a mirrorless or DSLR camera, and this excludes my point and shoot friends, you're going to get a kit lens. I do recommend you start with a kit lens, because you don't necessarily, unless you've done this before and you're getting ready to buy another camera to add to your collection, it's a total different story. The brand new, you're just about to start photography, you've never taken a picture or you haven't taken one in 20, 25 years, I would say get the kit lens. Typically the kit lens is a cheapy lens. It's not meant to be professional grade at all. However, it's a great intro into what this all is about. So for example, on this lens, Nikon goes by a couple different monikers. They have DX, FX, and Z mount. FX and DX are the same mounting type for a camera, and that might be confusing. But the way to look at this is DX is crop sensor, FX is full frame. I won't confuse you with that this week. That'll be intermediate class where we talk a little bit more about the full frame and crop sensor. But this lens is 18 to 55, meaning that when this is on your camera body, you're going to get a wide angle to what they call a perfect portrait. Perfect portrait's around 50 millimeters. You'll see a lot of lenses that shoot at 35 or 28, 50, 75. Those four are also in the perfect portrait kind of category. But 50, they say, is the perfect portrait because it shoots the same way that our human eye sees. So if you just look out your eyes right now, that's a 50 millimeter view. This lens then has a variable aperture. The variable aperture is that top number that says 3.5 to 5.6 G. And what that's basically meaning is that at 18, you get a 3.5 aperture, and then as you zoom into 555, it's not going to give you 3.5 anymore, it's going to then change to 5.6. That might seem really confusing. Next week we really break down what aperture means, and it'll make more sense with that. But on some prime or heavy duty lenses that can cost more or be more expensive, you can get a continuous aperture where it stays at one number the entire time and doesn't change its variability. Moving away from the kit lens, now we get into something that's more deliberate in our purchasing. We might buy what's called a Nifty 50 or a prime lens. Now we call it the Nifty 50 because it's nifty, and it rhymes and people just kind of like that. But for a period of time there, the 50 millimeter lens is considered the holy grail of lenses, just because again it takes a perfect portrait. If you're trying to get something that looks like what the human eye sees it, doesn't distort, doesn't make things look funny or funky, usually a 50 millimeter is the way to go. Now, I talked about that 3.5 to 5.6. If I look at this lens, it's a 1.4 on the very top of the lens. Now, in the world of photography, that smaller the number is, the more open our aperture wings are. And that being said, the more light that gets let into our camera. The more light that we have and the smaller the number, the more I can blur out the background. Which again might seem complicated for right now, and I wouldn't concern yourself with it. But if you are, let's say you're well off, you've got a lot of money, and you're like, I'm just going to buy everything that I can. I would say that if you're brand new to photography and you have no idea what you're purchasing or doing, typically if you get a prime lens with something that's a 1.4, 1.2 aperture, it's going to be expensive, but it's going to be a really great lens once you learn how to use it. But 50 millimeters is a great lens to get, 50 millimeter. However, though, a prime lens as a whole stands for a singular number lens, meaning that this stays at 50. If I go back a slide, the other lens that we were just looking at was an 18 to 55, meaning that I could zoom with this lens. It's what you call telephoto. Prime lenses stay at one number, meaning that, let's say this little Christmas decoration that we have now here in the store, I want to get a fuller shot or maybe a more close-up shot. With the 18 to 55, I can zoom in or zoom out. With this one, I'm going to have to walk myself over or walk myself backwards to get the proper framing that I want on it. So while this might be a better lens and give me more variability for as far as background to foreground separation, more light, higher quality image, I don't get the flexibility that I get out of a telephoto lens. That being said too, kit lenses for the most part will be variable and they'll be telephoto, but then they also make telephoto lenses or zoom lenses. Now, both of these lenses are the top of the line for Sony and for Canon. For Canon, they mark their top or high-end lenses with a red stripe that goes across the top. They call it the L series glass. With Sony, their favorite color is orange. And so you will see a little G on there. If the G is a black G, it stands for their just G, or their G Master, if you will. They just call it a G. Now, if you see if it's orange with the G on there, it's what they call their G Master. And the G Master basically is their top-of-the-line best glass, but then also best aperture. So these two lenses both probably sell for about $3,000, but they have a 2.8 aperture, meaning that where the kit lens was a 3.5 to 5.6 and changes as you zoom back and forth between the 18 to 55. When I zoom in at 24 and I zoom to 70, it's not going to leave 2.8 unless I change it to something else, meaning that it's going to let a good amount of light in, it's going to take a high quality photo, and it's going to do really nice background to foreground separation, which for a more professional photographer, intermediate photographer, means the world to them. Same thing with this one. This is a 70 to 200, so this is for big zoom. I want to look across, let's say, the atrium right now and take a picture close up of the furniture section that's over there. The 70 to 200 can do that. It's going to let a lot of light in, and it's going to blur my background out like no other. So again, there's differences between the lenses that we're looking at, and there's kind of a weird price jump when you go between them. However, telephoto zoom give you the ability to zoom back and forth between your images. Prime lenses don't. And on top of that too, then kit lenses are your entry level that are really just meant to be your fundamentals, kind of walk into what it is that the cell is. This is the way that I really differentiate the difference between prime and zoom lenses before I then get into the last type of lens that I recommend or that you'll see out there. Prime lenses, single number, they let the most amount of light in. They have the best foreground to background separation, and they're typically lighter weight. Zoom lenses don't let as much light in, or can be variable light. They're heavier, and on top of that too, because they weigh more, it's sometimes harder to be stable with them as well too. So keep that in mind when shooting. Both are fantastic and both have different needs and different wants. Personally, when I go on vacation or when I do anything, I take two lenses with me. It's a 35 millimeter and a 24 to 70. The 35 has some wide angle to it, but it still takes a perfect portrait. Mine goes all the way down to 1.4. It's a great lens. The 24 to 70 is the lens that gives me wide angle to portrait. While it doesn't necessarily have the same crisp kind of photos that the 35 does, it's still a fantastic lens and really gets my daily driving done, if you will, for photography. So if I'm out and about and maybe I'm with friends or family, it's the holiday season, my 24 to 70 is perfect for that, because if someone's sitting in front of the tree, I can get the tree and them in the same picture. They don't look funny, distorted, or anything like that. Let's say they're opening up a really awesome gift and I want to zoom in on their hands as they're tearing the box open, I can do that. With a 50, let's say we want to get that perfect picture in front of the tree for Christmas and I really want to get the best detail possible. I'll set the camera up on a tripod, remote into it, go stand in front with everybody, hit click, and then take the photo.
So if you have a telephoto lens, and let's say you want to take a nice portrait, if you set it to 50, is that the best
I would say
setting for it then?
50, I'd say 35, 50, or 75. Okay. Those three numbers would be perfect for a portrait. On like a lens like what you have, I can't tell, but it looks like it's the 28 or the 20 millimeter. Oh no, you've got a zoom, so yours is 24 to 70. So yours is closer to that other lens that we were talking about, which is really great for this one, because then you have that flexibility of zooming in and out if you really want to, which is really nice. So yeah.
So, can you explain that? What's the Zeiss feature?
So
On the
Zeiss
lens?
is the glass. So
Okay.
years and years ago, Sony acquired Zeiss, which is a German lens manufacturer, and then they integrated it in there. Zeiss is basically their, I don't want to say lowest quality, but it's a higher quality than if they were just to say it's a non-Zeiss lens. So you're getting a really nice handcrafted glass on this camera body, if that makes sense. To really specify, it's the fact that there is, let's say, what's the term I'm looking for? It's the way they coat the lens and the glasses too. So within there, there's nitrogen inside all of your lenses. That nitrogen helps to keep the glasses suspended in a certain point, so when they zoom back and forth, they keep that crispness on the inside. They also basically take a brush with different, like, let's say, acid coatings and all these different enamels, and they basically paint your lens before you use it, which then also helps the sharpness, helps the noise reduction, helps the clarity. So that's the other half of Zeiss, is that they go through a certain level of coating and gas chamber disruption that then help the lens take the picture that it does. So Zeiss is just their better term for, we're not giving you our bottom tier glass, we're not giving you G Master glass, we're giving you that nice in between. So just a good glass quality.
And another question, I noticed on you, it's a mount you can put on here.
Mhm.
It's with an Allen wrench that could give you another lens. I was looking for the name, I thought I had written it in
You
here.
can find it, let me know about it. I can at least let you know. We don't sell it here. A lot of companies will make third party stuff that then fits
Yeah,
on there.
third party,
Yeah, and it adds to it. It adds another layer to the whole thing.
I have to see it and I can tell you if it's worth it or not. I can at least find you some resources on it too. But I had someone that purchased one of those and they really liked it. I've seen other people who bought it and they were like, it just kind of seems stupid. But everybody's a little different on how they like to use it. I'm never one to say don't get something just because it's not made by Sony or by a certain company. Try it out because it could be the best thing. I get people all the time who buy I don't have one myself, but they'll buy the cases that wrap around this, so when they take photos, it'll then have an extra lens that pops off. And I don't necessarily like it, but some people love it. And so it's basically, it's really up to you.
Yeah.
Tell me the difference between on your zoom, what your regular zoom and a digital zoom is.
So digital zoom means that the camera's doing the work for
Right.
you. And the case of this technology, you have optical zoom the whole time. Because the digital zoom comes from models like that.
Yeah, this other one, my other one has a
Digital zoom. Yep. And that's just because usually in those compact cameras, to keep it really tight and small, it needs digital, not optical.
Well, we don't get into, I was gonna say, how do they achieve that?
They have a way of changing it where the sensor with the glass that's there can then zoom back and forth. It's partially that the sensor is doing most of the zooming work for you and less of the glass.
But there's not, the aperture is not, it's not as good when you do it digital.
100%. That's the point. Yeah. Yeah. So you save money with the digital zoom a lot of the times. However, though, the quality then gets kind of taken away from that. So it depends on the type of photographer you are, and it also depends on what you want to spend.
Yeah.
And that's always the name of the game with photography. The last lens I'll talk about, before then I talk about a few little things that you might want to pick up, are the travel lenses, or all-in-one lenses, if you will. I get a lot of people that come in that, surprisingly, they're going on safari. That's what I always hear about. Oh, I'm going to Africa. We're going to be in a Jeep tour in a cage, and I want to make sure I get the pictures of the lions or they're chasing zebras. And I'm like, that's awesome. They're like, I don't want to take my big camera with me. I want to have one lens that does it all, and that's it. Well, in that case, I'd recommend something like this. Travel lens gives you a large spectrum of number. That's good for zoom, wide angle, close-up shots, portraits, everything. It's not necessarily going to have the most pretty aperture. So like this case, it has a 3.5 to 5.6, very similar to a kit lens. However, you want to go wide angle and get everything, you can do that. You got the zebra chasing down, about to eat the lion chasing down and eating the zebra. You can zoom into 135 and really get that close-up shot. I had a dad who came back with his son, and he was so excited. First thing he shows me is this lion, just blood all over its face. It just ate something big, and he was like, "Isn't this awesome?" And I'm like, "That is." And he was showing me because he picked up a travel lens before he left. So everyone's different on what they like and use, but again, if you are looking for something that does it all, that doesn't necessarily have the best aperture to it, this would be a really nice substitute into then bringing all your lenses with you.
It's 18 to what?
18 to 135 is this one.
135.
But I know, like, for example, there's some Sony lenses that we have that are 50 to 300 or 50 to 400. You can get some really beefy lenses that are no bigger than this, but when you zoom all the way out, now they're like this big. So you can find all sorts of stuff. It really depends. This is just one from Nikon that I could find that was clean cut out, but they call this a travel lens or an all-in-one.
You gonna mention anything about a macro?
Macro is another one. I don't talk about that nearly as much because it really comes down to if you need it. Macros typically are going to be a larger millimeter size, so you'll see 90 millimeter macros, you'll see 105 millimeter macros. And what separates a macro from a standard lens is the fact that the macro lens has the ability to focus usually with up to about 6 or 5 inches from your subject all the way to about a foot. And then from there, once you get past a foot, that's where it starts to focus a little less. The idea with a macro is that you can get up as close to an object as you want, and you can see the little details or finer details on there. I get people who do insect photography, flowers, or jewelry photography was a big one that I just had. I had one guy who was a dentist who came in, and he bought Nikon's 105 macro. And the idea with that was that he liked to take detailed shots of people's mouths as he was working on them. And I mean, he warned me beforehand. He's like, "I hope you don't get freaked out." Some people get freaked out with the dentist stuff. I'm like, I've seen photos of so many messed up things. I'm like, just show me. And it was really incredible, like seeing. I mean, you could see the infection of the root canal as he was working on it, the details of it, and it was disgusting. But at the same time, it was really cool when you get to see that kind of stuff. So macros are great, but it's more of an intended purpose for macro. Macros aren't going to be your all-around lens, but again,
No.
yeah. Flowers, insects, things that you want close detail, you're able to position that lens about 6 to 12 inches away from the subject matter and still focus. You could try them with the lenses you have on your cameras, and it might still work to a certain degree, but depending, the camera usually has a hard time the closer you get to an item, unless it's specifically a macro lens.
Do you recommend a wide angle?
I do recommend wide angle. Again, it depends on what you're shooting. Those would qualify under telephotos, because they telescope in and out, but 16 to 35 is one of the most popular from Sony, and they're fantastic.
Yeah, I had one. I used to take, in our dining room was small. We
Yeah.
got a big family. You know, I couldn't get everybody in.
Yeah.
The wide angle really worked nicely.
Yeah, they have that. They have like an 11 millimeter if you just want a prime one. But I do like wide angle. But again, depends on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Especially when you have like people in there, they can sometimes distort the images slightly.
A little bit.
But but once you get closer to that 35, if you can back yourself up a little bit, you can get everybody in, especially in like a dining room setting or in front of the tree. Yeah, that'd be great. And then I put the quotations around need because, again, I still recommend that you stick with the kit lens to start, familiarize yourself with the product. As you're saying, wow, okay, I can do this with the camera, but I can't do this with the camera. That's where then I feel like then you can look into other lenses that you actually might need. But for, let's say, just conversation's sake, you're going into this, you're like, I've got $10,000 to spend. Insane amount. What should I buy with my camera? For my camera, these are the lenses that you need. So they call it the Trinity. A prime lens, a 24 to 70, and a 70 to 200. The three lenses that if you have, you should be set for a long, long time. But they do recommend the 50 millimeter prime because it sees like the human eye, it takes the perfect portrait. It's the ideal lens for the portrait or people photographer. 24 to 70 is your street walking lens. This is you walking around downtown Chicago saying, okay, this group of people having a conversation, drinking a cup of coffee looks like a really interesting picture. Snap, snap. Now you're walking, you're like, wow, I love how this building looks so tall. I want to move into the 24 and take this really long, wide shot. Beautiful. Now you're in nature, you're walking around, you're taking bird photography, you're doing plants, you're doing all sorts of cool stuff that takes distance. 70 to 200 is the last lens. It's heavy, it's bulky, but at the same time you can really get nice, beautiful, long distance shots of things that if you get too close to it might scurry, run away, you might lose a lot of it. 70 to 200 is great for that. This is the trinity of lenses. If you're going to get them, this is the 3 I would recommend getting. However, like I said, it's a need, not a want, or a want, not a need. I would stick with the kit lens to start, figure out what you love taking pictures of, what's making you the happiest. From there then, to improve on what you would love to take photos of, that's where then I would invest in the lens that's going to give you the best version of that. Whether it's portraits, whether it's wide angle, whether it's landscape photography, insects or plants or bugs, whatever it is that you're taking photos of, get the lens that's best suited for that purpose for you, so that way you're getting the most out of what you're buying. I personally have all 3 of these lenses plus 7 or 8 more, and I still use the same 2 every time I go places. I use my 50 if it's a portrait shooting that I'm doing, or I do a lot of animal photographies for rescues in Chicago. I do tons of dog photos, and with that being said, the 50 is perfect for that because I get beautiful detail on them that helps get them adopted. When I'm out with my friends and family and we're just trying to get candid photos of us just doing goofy things together or having a fun time, 24 to 70 is my favorite for that. And every once in a while I see myself going to a national park or doing something that's out of the country, out of the world, whatever it is, my 70 to 200s with me on my side. So again, it depends on what you're doing. On top of that, I have 35s, I have macros, I've got wide angles that are 11 millimeters. I've even got ones that are goofy. It's meant to look like they call it a dispo lens. It's meant to look like a disposable camera. And it's a real small pancake lens that goes under my thing. It takes ugly photos, but it actually looks really cool. And I look at them again, I'm like, oh, this is fun. So everybody's different. Everybody finds different purposes in lenses. Just remember that you don't need any lenses. It's that you want lenses, but find out exactly what it is that you're taking photos of and invest heavily in that. Last couple things. Use the timer and the camera apps that are on your phone. They're fantastic. They're really useful. I know you were just showing me the Creator app from Sony. That's one of the best apps out there. When it comes down to it, it's not always the best to download the photos to the phone. It'll kill the battery life on your camera real quick if you can't charge it. And on top of that, it will lower the quality of the photos slightly on the phone. I recommend look them on the computer first, and then from there, once you download them, you can go through and figure out what you don't like and do like, and then send them to the phone. Make it easy for yourself. But I don't poo-poo it. I don't think it's a bad idea, so try out the app, try out the timer on there. You'll get some really fun shots. Last thing we'll talk about is content creation real quick. Everybody asks about this, so I think it's important. When we get to some of the last classes, we'll talk more about this in the advanced camera class, but things to keep in mind are video quality, stabilization, lighting, and microphones. Video quality, proper lenses, and proper camera bodies and settings. As you start to learn the camera, there's so many different features and functions on there. Just find the best ones that will help you take the best photos and videos. Same thing with lenses. Stabilization, tripods, gimbals, finding the product that helps you keep the camera from shaking. Lighting is so important. The sun is really, lighting is your best friend, because without light we couldn't even take a photo, and we wouldn't even be able to see each other. So that's an important aspect of it, and understanding the differences between the lights that are available for you to buy and the sun, which you can use for free. Microphones too are huge. I like to look at it as the sound system of your camera. You buy a new TV nowadays, the sound is crummy, it comes from the back end of the TV, shoots at the wall, it'll sound muffled and blurry, it doesn't sound right. So you put a sound bar on your TV, you put a sound system on there, you get the big speakers. Same idea goes with cameras. You get microphones that attach to the camera that give you better sound quality. All this stuff is available. It's all sometimes over people's heads on it, so I don't recommend just going into it blind and buying stuff, because you never know if you're actually going to need it or use it. But easy ways to get into it if it is something you're interested in, which you have with the tripod vlogger kit. They make these content creation kits that are out there where some of them will come with a physical camera, like the one from Canon. Others will just come with a little tripod, a microphone on there, a remote, and a SD card or another piece that might be valuable to you. If you think that this is something you're into, especially with the video and people making more video nowadays, it's really not a bad idea to purchase one and try it out. if I did have anything that I could say to buy as quickly or immediately if you can, I would say the top 5 things here are the most important. Get yourself a camera bag. You invested so much money into this thing. It'd be a shame if you drop or broke something. I say do as I say, not as I do with this one, because I will travel to a foreign country and I will not pack my camera in a bag. The camera will be around my neck the entire time. From the airport to when I land to when I get somewhere, my camera never leaves my neck. So get a bag, do as I say, not as I do. Extra battery, extra memory card. I talked about that memory card being fragile in the beginning of class, but batteries, we forget to charge them. It's a secondary thought. You at least have 2. You go somewhere, let's say you leave your camera on for the whole day and then you go to take a picture of something, now your camera's at 20%. Have an extra battery with you. You won't regret it in the long run. Yes, it's more bulk and things you gotta carry, but it's a good idea. Lens cleaning kits. Please do not use your sweater, your t-shirt, your grubby fingers. Buy the lens cleaning kit. It'll help the longevity of it. The way I look at it is if I use my sweater to clean my camera, there's little abrasions on my sweater. It's a rough material. It'll naturally scratch it. And it might not look like it the first time you do it. It might not look like it the second time you do it. 100 wipes down the road, 50 wipes down the road, 500 wipes down the road. Now your camera's having a hard time focusing. It doesn't look right. You're getting kind of like weird spots on there. That all comes from improper use. Buy the little cloth kit that you get for your sunglasses or for your regular glasses, even for the TV. They get those nice microfiber cloths. It's a good investment. And then a strap. Most cameras come with a strap. However, for the most part, some of them aren't comfortable. They're not nice to use. You've got the little pieces that make it where you can take the strap on and off. I have that on every single camera I own, even film cameras. Again, it's just a nice little thing to keep on the camera, and it's padded for mine, so it keeps my neck nice and clean and soft. If you need it, tripods are available. They make tons of different weights and different types, video, ballpoint, all this different stuff. External hard drives, if you're not going to be using a cloud-based solution to save your photos. Filters, like neutral density filters and variable zoom or polarizing filters, or even fun effects filters. They make ones that have sparkles on them that take cool pictures. Additional lenses, we talked about lenses today, but as you start to really get into it, just get other lenses that you really like. And lastly, classes and workshops. I'm a free class. I teach it every Thursday. I've been doing this now for about 2.5 years. I'm going to continue to do it for more years to come. It's important to just be a forever student when it comes to photography. There's always new stuff coming out. There's always new stuff to learn. But if you're not out and about using the camera, it's pointless what I'm telling you, because it's just going to go in one ear, out the other. You can write down everything, but unless you're putting this to practice and trying. There was a weird period of time when I was in college and I was in photography classes when I was still at the school. And one of the things I did, I would bring my camera when I go grocery shopping. And I liked the way that products were lined up on shelves. I thought it was interesting, and I'd photograph that. And I'd play with how the light was bouncing off of a box of Cheerios versus a can of soup. It was weird, but it was one way that I got to understand the camera and also get other things that I needed to get done. Am I recommending it? Try it. And it might seem weird to people, but again, it's you. Who cares? So, but do classes, do workshops, become part of photography groups. There's one that meets out of the Botanical Garden, which is really cool. I get to see a lot of those guys. They come in to buy new gear and they'll brag about their photos. There's clubs all throughout Chicago that don't cost any money. You just join, you show up, and you create a community that loves taking pictures. There's so many things you can do within photography to better yourself, but then just to be more involved. So again, practice is the key.
Let me ask you this, any new technology that you might know about that, what look like to me, everything is here. What more can it
You know,
go to?
that's what they said when DSLRs came out, though. That was how they felt when film was going away and digital SLRs were coming out. Everyone said, this is the number, this is it. What else can you do with it? And then mirrorless came around the corner, and mirrorless has gotten better, I'd say, over the last 10 years. It's now just taken off incredibly. You're going to see a lot more with speed. You're going to see a lot more with quality. Just like the TVs. You've went from HD to 4K, now you got 8K TVs. I mean, you're going to see that with
8K
cameras
cameras?
too. Yeah, they got 8K cameras. My camera shoots in 8K.
That's the highest as
Right.
of this time.
Yeah, highest right now.
Okay.
You got, I mean, the Sony has this new technology called global shutter, where the shutter shoots and it closes from multiple angles, but I mean, the sound and the quality of image that it takes is unbelievable. You've got brands like, you know, Nikon now that just bought Red Camera, which Red is one of the big video manufacturers. They're one of the people love them. Now Nikon's got that technology that they're integrating into their cameras. You're going to see a lot more, I'd say, happen on the video side than the photo side. But just like everything, you know, I mean, 15, 20 years ago, if you said, oh yeah, your phone's going to have internet on there, people would probably look at you like you're nuts. So it's the same thing. We're just going to continuously see these things improve in weird ways, and technology booms for 1 second, and then it slows down for right now. Right now, I'd say a lot of it is at a standstill, where it's taken off so big. I mean, since I've been teaching this class, and I've been now here at Apt for about 4 years, I've been a photographer for over 20 years. In the 20 years that I've taken pictures, I've gone from shooting film and Polaroid cameras to then shooting DSLRs to now shooting mirrorless. And if you would have asked me when I first really started getting into it, I would have looked at you and laughed and said, I don't know anything about mirrorless. I don't think it matters. Now I think mirrorless is the best, and that you can't get better than that for right now. So it's going to keep changing.
And I remember when I was a kid, you take the films and mail it in, you wait a week, but now.
Yeah, and I still shoot on film. I develop my own film at home, actually. I go through all the time. So it's one of those things. Everyone does it a little differently. And it's, yeah. So, and film is becoming more and more popular. I got guys who have been telling me in other camera shops, I go to different camera conventions, and they'll sit there and say the same thing. They're like, listen, we threw away all the fridges that stored our film. That is beautiful.
That's my mother. She passed away, and I said, let me bring it down.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Oh, definitely. I love it. No, it's awesome. See, and like you can see the layer of dust that sits, but it's a nice memento, if anything. I have a film camera that I shoot on regularly with. It's my Canon. It's an AE1, and I have a Leica that I shoot on that has film too. However, I look and there's, you know, I have a Voigtlander that my grandfather got when he was in Germany. A German camera. It's a rangefinder. It's gorgeous. The shutter's slow on there, but I'll never throw it away. I love it. It's a piece that I've used. I shot film on it for years before it slowed down, but it reminds me of a lot of different things. And as I play with my camera, I'm constantly reminded. I'm like, you know, I just fall in this generational pattern of photographers, of videos.
How far we came.
Isn't it crazy? I love it. I love it.
My father was a professional photographer.
Yeah.
He worked for a newspaper years ago,
Yeah.
and then he started his own business. And he was born in 1900, believe it or not. So I have his graphics at home.
That's awesome.
It's you with the
Yeah.
Flash
the
bulbs on it.
plunger and everything.
well, I used to have the
Yeah.
packs, you know, take the slide out and then take the picture, put the slide
Slide
back.
right in. Isn't that crazy? And then, and on top of that, that was new cutting technology for that time, and then it just kept changing. I had the opportunity to go to Germany last April for Leica. They hand build all their cameras, but Leica is very well known because they created the very first 35 millimeter camera. I believe it was in either 1898 or 1903 or 5. It's around that period of time where they developed the technology to create 35 millimeter film, which then revolutionized the world, and we've been shooting on 35 millimeter for hundreds of years now at this point. But it's one of those things where, again, someone had to do it, and then someone had to say, well, I can make this better, and then that's just how it continues to go. So one thing I leave on this, but then we can talk about anything anybody wants to, but I always like to look at this quote when I think of photography, that the bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of a low price is forgotten. Get the deal, always be chasing for deals. Photography is an expensive hobby, it can get expensive, but just remember that sometimes it's important that you spend a little extra money in photography to get the proper device or thing that you need to take you to the next step, versus just going after something that's got a real low price. So keep that in mind when you're shooting on it, and just getting into everything. That's the one thing, if I can bestow, I'm always after getting, you know, paying a nice price to get something good, but if it's not the thing I want, and I'm just trying to, you know, get something because I need it, and this would do, I end up regretting it, because eventually it doesn't work the way I want it to. Other than that, I think that's all I got. So intermediate class is next Thursday. For anybody who's watching online, and sorry we're over time a little bit, everybody. Thanks for everybody who's watching. It is going to be on the 14th. So next week, the 14th, that'll be next Thursday, we will have intermediate camera class from 5:30 to 7. Tune in online, come in person, whatever you like.
Okay.
Intermediate, we're going to get more into the manual aspect of the camera, how to use things like aperture, shutter, ISO, talk about the differences there, and then talk more about some of the other settings and things that you can do. Advanced photography, we really get into photo editing and what it means to take a really nice photo and edit that afterwards. And then on top of that too, we talk a little bit about taking photos and some tips and tricks I have that I learned. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys.
Okay.
Any other questions that you have for me?
For this camera,
Yeah.
a wrist strap.
Yeah.
I heard you say about the orange thing with the
Yeah.
straps.
Yeah.
You sell those here, huh?
The wrist straps, I don't.
Because you know, you're on a boat or something.
It's not a wrist strap, this is kind of
Then you've got the actual strap.
a, yeah,
You can
Goes
get.
around your neck.
You can get, there's some straps, you can check with the sales guys downstairs, they might have, they call it a camera clutch, where you'll be able to wrap your hand on there and hold it like this. It should have came with a wrist strap when you got it. If it didn't, you could just go online.
I brought that, it was used, what do you call it, when they bring it back?
Oh, it was a floor model, and they didn't have that?
Yes, I didn't get the strap.
I would take a look online. You could find a nice wrist strap. If not, talk to the guys downstairs. They might have a couple options for you.
Yeah.
Can't think of any off the top of my head right now. I'd have to look at the computer. But yeah, I mean, it's not coming in another day. You can look online too and see what else is available. You just have to be particular with yours because you have a small little like section for it,
Yeah.
where he has a bigger loop that goes around his sides. I mean, you get whatever size he wants. That's the one thing I will say with this model, is that it only has the 1-2. The other option, which is really nice, and actually, if I'm not mistaken, that camera strap would have it, where on the bottom, they actually have a plate that it can come with, where then a regular camera strap to go, and the camera will hang upside down on your neck, and then you want to use it, you just pick it up and then take the photo, if that makes sense. So you can go both routes.
Okay.
But they have a bunch of stuff out there for it.
On your card,
Yeah.
that, website's on your emails on your card?
Yes, my email's changed. It's now just my first name at app.com, but yeah, you'll see them downstairs.
You got a card, what you
I
know?
don't have one on me right now. If you go down there, just ask for one. They'll have it
Okay.
for you. Yeah, just say on Saxon's card, and they'll grab it for you. They got the camera class schedule card too, which definitely grab one of those. That way you know. But yeah, and I always tell people I'm off Tuesday and Wednesdays. So if you come in any day of the week other than those 2 days, you want to talk cameras, you want to talk shop on stuff, I tell customers if you take photos and you want to show them to me and get my opinion, I'm always here to help and talk with that kind of
Okay.
stuff. So any day other than Tuesday, Wednesday, you'll see me.
because I think that 1, 2, 3 is interesting as custom site.
Yeah.
They can improve on the automatic, can't they? I mean, if
They
you're
do.
doing a certain, like you wanna take a portrait, can you set something up for?
You can. It's just what you're really setting on there are certain priorities. So, like, let's say, and we'll talk more on the intermediate class on what those
Yeah.
priorities are. But let's say that your white balance, you want to keep it at that balance every single time. Well, then it'll do it under whatever C1, C2, or C3 is. You want to have your focus parameter where it just focuses on humans. You can then set that so it stays like that the whole time. When it comes to the manual control of it, that's always going to change and differ, and you're going to constantly readjust that as you're going. So I could show you what stays on the custom 1, 2, and 3 settings. The person you dealt with probably did do that, and maybe it's just something I have to actually click into the data and really see it. But just switching them myself and looking at the screen as it changed, it didn't do too much change. So,
Okay,
but we could play with that. Absolutely.
okay, good, great.
Good stuff, gentlemen.
Very
Thanks for
good.
showing up. I appreciate
Yeah.
you. Let me open this door for you. You can leave any empty water bottles. I'll give it up for you.
I got one more question.
What you got? What is
I don't know if it's working or not.
Let's see.
Can you?
So this is.
I brought it from you guys. I did some scuba diving years ago, and I tried charging it up. I don't know. I had
This guy definitely did not turn it on. Let's open this thing up. so two options. What I would do is come on in one of the days when I'm here, and we'll try to throw another battery in there that's actually charged up. It's the NPBX1, which Sony still makes this. We can throw
You
another-
sell that too, right?
Yeah, we sell it. But we'll try it out first to make sure before I sell you another battery, because it could be that this guy's just done, but it could just be that this battery is bad. What I would do is when you get home, try to plug it in via the micro USB. So, this guy right there. You got a micro at
Yeah, I
home?
charged it up before I left,
Okay.
and I don't know.
There you go, see you next week.
I'll see you next week, absolutely.
And,
Yeah, try charging it again when you get home, just to see, but I don't, doesn't look like, it's not strong. I haven't seen one of these things in forever. That's awesome.
yeah.
It's a fun little camera. This is how Sony was competing with brands like GoPro and other people that were
Yeah,
making
back-
these.
yeah.
Yeah, because these things just, they work really well and they're so easy to use. Oh, no, wait, hold on.
Came on,
Yeah, it's like one click. Yeah, no, this thing's working.
huh? Okay.
So yeah, all right there. Unfortunately, they don't show you the videos on the screen, so it'll only show you once you take everything out of the camera. The SD card is on the side there. It takes a micro SD. So you might need to put one of those inside there to get that to work. We also sell those here, so one of my guys can show you, or I can show you. Micro SD goes in there, and then yeah, this thing shoots at 720 HD.
Yeah, man, I had no intentions on buying the camera, but, I'm thinking I can shoot. They talking about iCloud and they wanna charge me money for it. And I said, well, if they're gonna do that, I might as well get me a camera.
Yeah.
I rushed down there and I said, abs the store for the cameras. I said, I had brought this one before. I went on a scuba diving trip. I brought that one. And I said, well, let me go down. This was years ago when it was kind of, when it first came out. But
Yeah, I have to learn. Actually, I have to play with this guy. 'Cause
yeah, it's a lot of little secret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so items name. Okay, so I just turned it off.
I don't even know if a card's in there now.
No, there's no cards. You definitely need to put a card in here for it to work. However, it could just be.
Some type of short that maybe, huh?
It could just be. Okay, so that turns it on, and then to power it off, you just have to. There we go. Okay, no, that works. No, you just gotta put a card in there, and then to turn it on, you press previous on there. What we can do is we can play with this guy next time. Just have that little SD card there, and I'll do some research on this, and I can possibly find you the book and print it out so we have it.
Yeah.
Cause yeah,
Another thing too, you gotta have time and patience for this.
oh yeah. No, it's a big part of it. Photography is one of those hobbies where it just adds up after a little bit, and especially because that's an older camera. If you,
Yeah.
that's the first time you're picking it up after how many years, it's like
I said,
it's
yeah,
all
that
gone.
old camera, I said, let me bring this camera.
Yeah.
Maybe you might know something about it, or
Let's see.
it's my mother's, she passed away.
So it's a
and she
brownie.
had a brownie,
Yeah, that's what they call it. So it's got a couple different features on here. So basically, this is the way you look at it. This is the plunger that takes the photo. Once you physically take the photo, then you need to move the film. So let's see, that locks it, that opens it. Oh, this guy opens from the top.
What type of film, like 127 or something?
Yeah, this is going to use a very special type of film. So this would use
You
basically.
probably can't get that film, can
No,
you?
absolutely. They make this stuff still. Yeah. So this would
What
be.
year do you think that camera was?
Let's see, let's actually tell me right here. So 1939. Wow, you can smell the old oil and the metal on there. It smells.
Yeah.
Ah, it's got that. Ah, I love that. So the way this guy would work is that you put a spool right here, The film will then, the film goes gets locked into here. From there, then it has this little bar which has a little bit of like oil slick to it, but basically it pulls the film across, and it then takes a wide photo, so it's wide exposure. From there, then, as you're using it, you turn this, and that's then what winds your
Shot, right?
and then shoots.
Yeah.
Now, the hard part with one of these guys, because it's so old, is that you really just kind of figure out what it is that you're taking a picture of, or you're figuring out like how many times you gotta move this. There's videos online that really make it simple for you to break it down. Yeah, 'cause you don't even have, no, it has no film count on there. Yeah, there is no way to know how many pictures you get. That's awesome. So, the way that this guy would work is that, yeah, you move this over until you got where you needed to be. You then get so this is your zoom on there. It takes one type of picture, and that would be, I believe it would probably be, what's the zoom I'm looking for? I can't think of it off the top of my head now, it's escaping me. You basically would get a wide angle picture with this, and you can view it right through here. So as you're taking your picture, you look through this, see what you like, and then take the physical photo. If you look through it, you can see how because it's so old, you can see kind of how blurry it is now.
Oh, yeah, and this is all scratch.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know,
You used it.
nobody.
There's the protection on any of that stuff.
Uh,
But then, yeah,
and once
those would be for clips. That would be to like actually hold it on. Yeah, I think there should be another one on this. No, there's not. Oh, interesting. Yeah, so that would be.
like for what, the bulb or?
I mean, not. Yeah, I guess it could be for the bulb. It wouldn't be for a strap. I'd have to actually see. So that could be for the bulb. That could be for a couple different things. That could be for the bulb itself, because a lot of the times you put the little stick on there, and then that would flash when you took the picture. And it also says it on there, flash 60 to 20. But the way the Brownie works,
So battery.
there's no battery. Yeah.
The battery might have been in the
It would have been a flash, yeah. So depending on how far away your object is, 5 to 10 feet, you just set it to that. Anything beyond 20, and you can see that there's like a little piece of glass that moves right in front.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, you basically would just wind this,
So, take the picture.
and then take.
Yeah.
It would then load. This would then be, I think, if you have a bulb on there. I don't honestly know. That I'd have to look these two pieces up. But I mean, yeah, if you flip this thing upside down, so there's a lock button. If we keep it on the open, and then just pull this up,
Yeah.
it takes thread paper over rolls. It's Kodak 620 film, which they definitely still make. And
Wow.
yeah, this was manufactured in Canada in 1939.
Wow. Wow.
The smell is fantastic though. Yeah, so roll of film goes on this side. And then it's the plunger which then opens this up, which
Yeah, I just thought I'd bring this, and then this thing's sitting around here.
yeah, no, this is really cool. We got the same things at home. We got a few different ones that none of us touch. No one really knows how to use them. I obviously have an idea, but I have. People still shoot on these.
You kidding me?
Now it's yeah.
And it makes me think about how far we came.
Oh, isn't it amazing?
You know, we used to throw these in the mail and.
Send them out and then you wait weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
It's funny. Every once in a while, I'll get someone who asks, they're like, "How do I do it?" I'm like, "Oh, well, you can just you can send it into Walgreens. Walgreens still develops film."
Yeah.
So, thanks for coming in. Thanks for showing me that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I enjoy it, and it's a lot. It's a lot to learn.
It is. But you keep playing with it, you keep practicing. That's the key, is that as
Yeah.
long as you practice, take your camera everywhere. You're seeing family or just going for a walk. I did it the other day. I try to take my dog for a walk every night late, and it'll be 11 o'clock midnight, and people still have their Halloween decoration lights up. So I brought my camera with, and that's all I did. I photographed the lights, and like, it looks cool.
Yeah.
It's dark, but
So do you ever post your
I do, on my social media and stuff, but I don't. Here's my thing: there's so many people out there who make a living off of it. That's their bread and butter. That's everything. For me, I do it for the love of it. I do it for the fun, but I don't ever get out there and do it because it's like some extravagant thing that I'm trying to make money off of. It's more just fun for me.
I want to show you. I know you want to get out of here. I got to get out of here too. this was my hobby. You say photography
Yeah,
is
yeah.
expensive. This is me right here.
Oh,
What that is.
jeez, aviation.
Yeah,
Fly.
yeah. Well, Biden got me out of it.
Yeah.
Man, the fuel went up so high, $7 a gallon, I couldn't afford it, man. And I said, forget it. So I don't know. Getting back in it, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to.
That's awesome.
That's me and another friend. of
That's
mine.
awesome.
Fun.
That's incredible.
Yeah, we had, a lot of photographers like to get up, go up with me and take pictures, man.
Yeah.
But,
That's fun how those two can intersect and cross. I mean, I love that.
Yeah,
Drones are becoming more and more popular for that
That's-
reason too.
that's what I'm thinking. And I even got a drone license.
Really?
Yeah, so,
So you can fly some of the big boys.
well, I just took the license, but I don't even have a drone. I was
Yeah.
talking with one of the guys, I'm thinking about buying a drone. I'm in the city.
Mhm.
I like to take pictures of the fire trucks
Yeah.
going down. They always going in the city. All
Yeah.
the time. So where are they going? What are they doing? Also maybe police and
Yeah. You can get some
something like
really
that.
amazing
Maybe
angles
post it.
with it, and there's some fun stuff that you can do with it. There's obviously some laws that go into effect with it, but since you have the pilot license, it's a huge
Yeah.
step because
Yeah.
a lot of it is a lot of it.
Mostly the license don't want you to be around TC terminal control area.
100%.
Where they airports.
Yes.
Airports where planes are going in and out. So you got to know that. So
If you look up online, there's a whole thing on geofencing and where you can and can't fly, and then there's certain areas too where you can fly, but you have to be this many meters off the ground, or then you have to be at least this high off the ground. So
Yeah.
there's areas that are completely open, but no, for the most part, yeah, you can do whatever you want. And there's some really nice ones that are entry level.
So are you know about the drones?
I do. Yeah, I fly a few of them myself.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't have any special licensing for it because there's
Yeah.
certain weight parameters with them where I'm under 249 grams, so I don't have to worry about them.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of good ones.
I was looking, maybe the small one.
Yeah, that's the one I would probably recommend. The
With
mini.
the goggles.
Oh, the Avata. Yeah, that one's fun. That one is fast, but because you've already got the experience of being the pilot, like that's the fun part is that it makes you feel like you're actually behind the wheel of that plane. The goggles as you wear them give you a perfect view of exactly what the drone sees.
Yeah, I'm thinking about. Maybe New Year's I might
Yeah.
be able to get some of these bills paid off.
I know, trust me, I feel you. I'm in the same boat after my vacation.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, let me know about anything. If you ever got questions on it, I've got a mini drone from DJI, and I love the thing, but it's tiny and smaller. Doesn't do the goggle capability, but it's still a lot of fun. So depending on which way you want to go,
Yeah.
the piloting experience, the Avata, more of the cinematic and like the cool angles and video. Then I would say go with the Mini or the Mavic or any of those series. So yeah, we can talk about it when you're ready.
Yeah. I've been to Australia too.
Yeah.
Australia's cool.
Oh, it was gorgeous. I was so happy to get to go and see everything. It was time of my life.
One of the things is the sun when you're in the airplane, man, how the day, what are we're
15 hours
they're
ahead.
a day ahead of
They were
us.
15 hours ahead, so we're
Yeah.
behind.
Yeah, so.
That was wild going down there.
Yeah.
I flew down and I think I took off at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. By the time I landed, it was still the same day, but it was morning. I'm like, I was discombobulated. Coming
Yeah.
back, especially, it took me a while to readjust. So
Yeah, some good scuba diving down there.
I know I was one. I didn't do that, but I saw a bunch of people doing it. They
You
had a
scuba
lot.
dive?
I don't know. I'm not a scuba diver.
You a swimmer?
I'm a swimmer though.
Well,
Big time.
hey man, you get like this camera I got,
Yeah.
man, that
Hey,
underwater photo, man. is
I know.
beautiful
I have a
stuff.
couple that go underwater every once in a while, rain, but it's one of those things where it's like I get involved with it, and then all of a sudden I forget because I'm just living the moment, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I should have brought my camera. So
Yeah,
I feel that.
yeah. Okay, Saxon. I
Take
appreciate
care. I'll
you,
see you
man.
soon. Thanks for
Okay.
coming. Thanks for everybody who was online for watching this. I appreciate you guys. If anybody has any questions, it doesn't look like anybody chimed in or had anything else for me. But if you have anything else in the future, let me know. I'm here every Thursday teaching a camera class, the first, second, third, and last Thursday of every month, if there's more than 4. But my name's Saxon. I'm your host. And if you need anything, give me a call, shoot me an email anytime. I'm here every day except for Tuesday, Wednesdays. Have a great night, everybody, and I will see everybody next Thursday for Intermediate Camera.